So Njabulo, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. Before we walk into the future, can you please tell us a little bit about your own backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
Born and bred in Johannesburg. I really grew up I would say across all the major townships of Johannesburg. So born in Alexandra Township. And then when I was a toddler, my parents moved to Diepkloof, which is Soweto, so another big township. And then my parents divorced, and from my teenage years onwards, we were in the East Rand, which is also, I think, also one of the other, I guess, major parts of my life, where I really moved from being a teenager into adulthood. Yeah.
And tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
To be an actress.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, when I was in high school, I was already doing reps, plays, adverts, and I was very sure this was going to be my life. And my mother gave me a reality check in matric, like, no, let's think about this. So yeah, that was the end of that dream.
And what attracted you to the world of HR and talent management, people management?
So when I went to Rhodes, really abandoning this actress idea, I actually registered, well, I did a BA, but I was studying journalism and psychology. Thinking maybe journ could be one route. So it was a bit of an exploration, but then in studying the psychology, I then came across the specialist fields in psychology, clinical psychology, forensic psychology, and then ultimately industrial psychology. So in my second year of university already, studying industrial psych, I fell in love, and that's really how I got into the path of being in HR, because it then became one of my majors. And just naturally into the HR space.
And Njabulo, you studied at Rhodes, Gibbs, and INSEAD, I believe.
Yes.
Can you maybe share what is your best memory from your education days?
Yeah, across the board. I think for me, Rhodes is definitely a highlight. One, I turned 16 at university with firstly, the first time leaving home. I finished my high schooling quite young. So first time leaving Joburg, went to Rhodes. That's one of the reasons I think it stands out. But one of the other interesting things for me was really, I would say it was very clear that this was an equal playing field. So there were children from private schools, township schools, Model C schools, which is what I came from. And the world was for us to make, with it what we wanted. So you saw some people really coming from a high, really not doing so well, people really striving out of poverty. And so I really loved Rhodes. For me, it opened my mind, it opened just my whole worldview. Gibbs happened much later, so 10 years into my career, where I was at a crossroads in terms of, is HR still the right profession for me? Didn't seem like the most well-regarded and respected profession, hence the MBA from Gibbs. But for me, that was also a powerful experience, because very quickly I realized that we all have different strengths and we contribute different things. On the MBA itself, I did very well in all the people leadership modules. I saw lots of other technical finance science people saying, I really want to learn about the leadership and people stuff, because that's really where it's at. And so very quickly it was clear to me that, sometimes you might feel inadequate in one space. I'm not a revenue generator. Maybe I should move into this part. But my power space, and really where I got to grow, know myself, and really contribute my base was definitely in this field. And so that's also why it was significant. So it didn't take me into another career path, but strengthened my position rather as a business partner, understanding how business works, having done an MBA, but really choosing then to really make it the best of my HR career. And then INSEAD came at a later stage, or I guess most recently, when I was with Heineken. Great, because it was an international experience. Being in France, Fontainebleau was really special. Being a hypo or talent for Heineken, and soon after moving to the Netherlands into a global role. So all of those education experiences hold different, special memories for me.
And I believe, Njabulo, earlier this week, you earned a certification from INSEAD about design thinking.
Yes.
Can you tell us
Yeah.
why is design thinking so important in general and for you in your current role?
Yeah. So for me, well, I think in general, I love it because it really challenges us. It challenges us in terms of how we think as leaders. And I think that's what leaders really need to always just that reflection, in terms of how we approach solutions. One of the famous examples is, how Apple as a brand was one of the first brands to really be about the customer and put the whole concept of customer experience right up there, rather than customers fitting into how they do, other organizations do things. And I think with design thinking, it's really embracing the new reality about the future that we're heading into around agility, the whole iteration process in terms of there's more than one way of getting to a solution. How do we try to source as many of those, play and experiment? I think that's a great mindset for any leader to have. For myself as an HR practitioner, I always thought, even now, sometimes I think I'm not the most maybe creative or fun person, even though I can come with really good solutions. I do believe I'm a great solutions partner and broker, but is it always the most creative? So I was challenging myself. Almost 20 years in January, I'll be 20 years in HR. I don't want to be a stiff HR person who's not in touch with reality. And one of my ex-colleagues who had done this program said it was just so perfect in her view, because it really challenged her in terms of how to look at different parts. I looked at employee experience. And in the same way that, we have customer experience, employees are also consumers of what the organizational environment and leadership is all about. And so that's been pretty powerful for me to then think about employees in that context and going through an employee journey from an experience point of view, thinking about it differently in terms of how we can impact it on different touch points. I've lost you.
Yeah, sorry.
Nick.
Going back to your early days, can you tell us who inspired you?
Yeah, I was a very curious child. So one, I read a lot. So my inspiration even came from characters in a book. I loved watching the Oprah Winfrey Show, which was, I don't know how many teenagers did that. But for me, I just saw a woman who looked like me on a world stage, talking to all these big, powerful people, whether they were celebrities, politicians, or different types of power, being influential. And that really just made me so curious about the world out there and opened up my mind. Closer to home, definitely my mother. She has broken so many barriers. Being the first to go to university, driving in the 70s, I think she's just done so many amazing things, which have broken a lot of stereotypes and just challenged a lot of ways of doing things.
Now, Njabulo, you have a very, very interesting and very impressive career profile. You work for the likes of Treasury, the JSE, Heineken, and obviously now Vodacom. Can you maybe tell us what was the turning point, if there was any, or maybe a number of turning points in your career?
Yeah, I would say a number. Firstly, super blessed, grateful to have started my career in the way that I did with Unilever. I always say I usually put my career into the first 7 years of my career, which was really starting with Unilever, SA Breweries, well-regarded organizations. Why that stood out is that set me up to just fly. You know, they recognized my latent potential. I didn't even see it in myself. I learned from the best of the best in terms of what real HR was about, where you're seen as an equal, you're here to contribute something, you don't compete with revenue generators. We are all here to enable and to make this organization work. So by the time I got into organizations which didn't respect HR, it was too late because I had the confidence. The next turning point, definitely, which then was the next 7 years really, was with my move to the Treasury. Although it was driven more by personal reasons, wanting to then leave Durban, come back to Joburg, I kind of landed at the Treasury when one of my ex-bosses from SAB actually said, I'm doing a project at the National Treasury, and I'm looking for people who understand talent management, who've worked in these private sector organizations who do it well. I was a bit hesitant, like, the government and all those negative connotations. But the best turning point, because having had the foundation that I had, this was now a moment to test myself as a professional. Do I really know HR? Do I understand it? Or have I just been fortunate to be in these really great organizations? But having a clean piece of paper, having to establish a talent management function, having to build credibility for the HR function, being rejected by the organization, building business cases, that turned out to be the best experience ever. Because one, I proved to myself that I could. I also learned some, tough lessons. So nobody wants your sexy talent management strategy if the basics are not in place. Pay people right, have the leave days right. Once you've built your credibility on the basics, then we take it to the strategic level, which is in the HR world, and I think anyway, is a lifelong lesson, which can definitely be fantastic. Yeah, and then I think maybe the recent one with Heineken before moving to Vodacom, I mean, that was significant, leading into an international career, looking after 7 opcos, dealing with, countries and markets from Egypt, Algeria. That was really incredible for me, and being able to do it from the head office in Europe as well. So I was having the best of both, looking after the part of the Africa region, but doing it from the headquarters in Europe. And it was such a powerful experience in terms of exposure.
Now, Njabulo, can you tell us what is driving you today?
It continues to be my passion for people. So I've moved on, and why I specifically say I've moved on is I know a lot of HR people are stuck in, HR is not taken seriously, and they almost have a low self-esteem about maybe not being at the center or whatever. I've moved on to realizing that people really are the differentiator in any organization. And I'm so fortunate, blessed to be in positions where I shape and lead the people agenda. And so my passion for people, it drives me, seeing people grow, building a pipeline of future leaders. Those are some of the things that make me excited, and hopefully bringing a difference as well, in terms of in terms of the conducive environment that we want people to grow and contribute in.
So, Njabulo, looking into the future of leadership, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it is a big question. To me, it's really about adapting to future realities, both in terms of changes in technology, what it means for people. So just starting on the tech side, we've been hearing about changes that are coming, artificial intelligence, the ways of working, roles no longer existing in the manner that they do. That future is already here. And I think for me, the future of leadership means being able to help people and champion them through changes. Change leadership is so underrated and underestimated. It's so critical. Change is constant, and real true leaders are able to navigate those changes and of course ensure that you bring people along. For me, it's about also bringing purpose and meaning, into various spaces that you operate in as a leader. Again, for a long time we heard, oh, millennials and future generations are not interested in just being driven by profit and about money. It's about purpose. We are in that reality now because people want to know what are you driving as an organization? What do you stand for? How will this be a meaningful experience for me? And so the future of leadership is also about being able to champion those things. And I love that the new generation and the upcoming generations also propose these tough questions around, moral issues, ethical issues. And I think that's what we're going to have to deal with in the future as well.
Now, Njabulo, you're working on the edge of the future of leadership. You're working with many future leaders. And in fact, we met on LinkedIn when you shared some insights about your collaboration project with Unilever, which I think has everything to do with future leaders. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yes. Yeah. So that's been a fantastic project to launch. Definitely, I mean, even based, your question earlier around design thinking, it's very much a experiment, learn, test type of project. So what that is, it's an exchange, a partnership between ourselves and Unilever. It's something at which Unilever had been toying with. Vodacom started also thinking about it. There were discussions on and off, but for me coming in, it made sense. Dusted off some of the old thinking, checked with people who had been trying to get it off the ground. For me, it coincided beautifully with the relaunch of our employer value proposition, which is really around an invitation to our employees and prospective employees to be innovative and to grow differently. I mean, I think everybody wants to grow and learn. I would love to believe that. And this is a great non-traditional way of growing, going into another organization, seeing how they do things, having a different experience and bringing back those lessons to be able to improve your existing environment. Of course, for the better, that's certainly the goal. And it was just also logical, I think, two top employers doing that. So I know Michelle from Unilever had been looking for partners. It just made a lot of sense to just jump in there and try it out, which is, I think, also the mode that I'm in, which is let's experiment, let's try and see if things work.
Well, interestingly, I don't know whether you remember, but around 2008 or 9, there was a similar project between the public and the private sector called the SA Experiment, which the then Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka chaired. And I don't know how far it went, but it was all about transferring skills, sharing skills between the private sector and the public sector.
Yeah. I mean, now that you mention it, it sounds familiar, and I think it's something that we should actively be doing. Absolutely. I mean, for me, that was also one of my highlights with working for the National Treasury. One was busting my own myths about my perception on public service, and maybe even educational as a South African citizen on how the government works, how the country runs. So definitely.
Okay. Now, Njabulo, looking back over your own leadership journey, what are the lessons you can share that are really important for building and empowering future leaders?
Sure, there's quite a few. I think for me, show up is the one. So what I mean by show up is be prepared, be active and involved, whether it's in a discussion, in a project, so because sometimes we allow self-doubt, especially when we are young leaders coming up, to hold us back from really putting our best foot forward or doubting ourselves. It's important to show up. It's important to take ownership One of the highlights as well for my career has always been being trusted with big responsibilities from a young age, but also young in terms of seniority. And I would say take those opportunities, take on accountability, make the most of those opportunities, and take that mustard seed and grow it into something big. And I think the point earlier around the type of leaders that we are. So I would say for my own journey, it's always been important that I bring people along. So in my team, and sometimes it's not all good news, by the way. So of course, identify potential, groom people and take them to another level, but also something about honesty and feedback. So it's a gift to give people feedback. It's a gift to say to people if it's not working out or you have to, maybe go see your separate ways. I've always found that it's important as a leader to make sure that you have the right team that you are working with, because ideally you deliver through those people. You are not the star and the hero. They are really the stars. But as a leader, you really want to be able to bring out the best in everybody.
And Njabulo, when it comes to social media, what is it you tell your team and any aspiring leaders about social media? How should they handle and navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
I hope by now that there is recognition that social media is quite powerful. I think, one, don't take it for granted that you always have a footprint and your fingerprints are all over. So one is being conscious of what you put out there in terms of the media. But coming back to the point around building a personal brand, it's a great platform to communicate. I think for me, LinkedIn has been definitely my favorite professional network to share thoughts, express my thoughts, even learn and see what other people are doing. From a personal branding point of view, you are able to highlight things that you're passionate about and use social media to be able to drive conversations, and you find like-minded people. Sometimes I've found even when maybe a topic is not at the right level of maturity in an organization that I'm a part of, I'm still able to engage with other people and source other views and other ways of looking at it, and create momentum through social media. And I think social media can definitely be very powerful.
Now, Njabulo, we are living in turbulent times, and so much has changed in the last 18 months during the pandemic, and so much, I guess, is still going to change. So what is your advice for future leaders when it comes to challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
Yeah, I think you use a great example in the pandemic. We could not have predicted it, although we know, we've had pandemics previously, it can happen again in the future, but the timing and certainly the impact that it's had, we could not have predicted that. So that is the challenge of future leadership is we live in a world that is uncertain. What leaders need to rely on is their ability to deal with that. So I think for me, having resilience, trusting your own judgment, learning, using your previous experience to be able to face challenges, that's what leaders are going to have to tap into. So living in an uncertain world, moving into a digital and technological world, definitely. That's a challenge and an opportunity. I think it's a challenge in terms of if the transition into this technology space is not managed, it can be more of a challenge, but it's also definitely an opportunity. I think for me, South Africa in particular, we are at an interesting space in terms of brain drain. It's not a new thing necessarily, but I think we go through waves. And it happens across the world, of course, but it's securing the right talent for the future, the right talent to take you to where you need to go to, particularly because even jobs and skills and capabilities are changing from what we've always traditionally known them as. So I think how we also code and identify talent has to be very different. And so finding the right talent to take your organization to where it needs to go to, these are the types of challenges that I still think that leaders are still going to face.
And tell us, Njabulo, if you had to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
Well, I'll mention definitely the design thinking. Yes, because I've recently been certified, but on a serious note, one of the things, we do live in this world of iteration and experimenting and learning fast. And some people thought to the whole discussions and move towards agile, it's just a buzzword, it's going to die out. The word itself might change, but the reality is a key capability that a leader has to have is that ability to adapt, be agile, live in this iterative world where we need to experiment. So if you're stiff and you can't deal with ambiguity, I mean, dealing with ambiguity, that's a competency on its own. Without that, you are just going to have a very difficult time. I would definitely put that in the curriculum. I'm not sure how much you can teach people to deal with ambiguity, but you can certainly test for their inherent ability to deal with it and improve on it, because it's a key competency to have. I would say dealing with issues of diversity and inclusion, and challenging unconscious bias. For me, we've moved on from, hopefully we are moving on from accusing some people of having unconscious bias and others not. We all have it. If you have a brain, you have a bias. This is now my favorite thing to say, ever since I went on my first unconscious bias training where I heard this. And the reality is we all have filters with which we look at the world, and what is the impact of that then in a workspace, in an environment that we operate in? Does it allow people to bring their best? Does it allow people to feel that they belong? These are all things that we need to tackle if we want a different world to the one that we have today.
So there's no such thing, I guess, like unfiltered, especially.
No.
Yeah. Now, Njabulo, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, I've been fortunate I think I was a reluctant mentor, if I can call it like that. And not so much because I didn't want to mentor people. I think maybe I was still growing into it myself and not sure that I had much to share, but I have been mentoring. And I think a success story that I could share is one of my mentees. His name is Njabulo. He approached me actually a few years ago, close to 10 years ago, and just said, I admire your career. I think I can learn a lot from you. He was still quite new in the HR field, very smart, bright young man. And I think also toying with, and a lot of people, HR people go through this, is HR really the field for me, or should I just give up? Should I move on to something else? And of course, I convinced him HR is the field for him. But since then, he has moved on to more and more senior roles, and he is now even in a HR lead role for, I think it's EASF. I hope I'm mentioning the right organization, but I know he's heading up the HR function for them. And he's done many other incredible things. He's done his master's in Japan recently, before coming back and doing some of these senior roles. So very proud of that. And yeah, I'm sold now on why it's important to mentor. My mentee now that I have, and I'm so proud of that as well, is well, I have a few more. Maybe I should mention that, but the other one that I'll mention now here, why I'm mentioning him is that he's coming out of, he actually works in an engineering environment in the technology space. And I was very proud of him for approaching me as well, because he obviously looked past those filters of, an engineer talking to an HR person, but he actually saw a leader and he knows he's heading in that direction. And he wants to know how he can be the best leader, because that's progressive. I think we still sometimes promote people because of ability, and then they come across these people and leadership issues, and it's fantastic when young people can already see that.
Now, Njabulo, in your leadership journey and maybe in your learning journey, who are the types of role models of leadership that you would suggest future leaders should study and learn from?
Yeah, I have so many. For me, I think when you look at yourself as a future leader, I would ask the question of leading in what space? Is it as a so in my case, for example, as an HR leader, or it could be within commerce, running a business. I would say for me, look for role models who are already doing what you aspire to do. Maybe even if it's not in the exact format, but directionally you can see this is the type of leader that I would want. For me, that's meant looking at people who have been quite successful and powerful in HR roles. And I mean, interestingly, I work with Matimba now, but for a while I would look at him and say, wow, there's somebody who's leading a really huge organization at that level. Tsuelo Kodisang, who was recently at Discovery, has been one of my role models, previously one of my big bosses, but a role model also just in terms of how he very quickly became a partner to the business. And it was not issues of negotiating the space for HR at the table, but how can we partner and how can we do it well? I have many business leaders as well. Nikki Newton-King, who was the CEO of the JSE, as a woman leading in the financial space. For me, I would say I study all sorts of leaders. Sometimes it's gurus in my function that I'm in. Sometimes it's business leaders that I see in the world around me. Business leaders like Puti, I mean, there's so many people. I should say Puti Dabema just so that people know, like, she's my best friend. The way I just say Puti, just to contextualize it. Yeah, there are so many people that I admire. Sorry, I don't know if I should give a list, but I just went through some of the people that come to mind for me.
That's fine. That's exactly what we're looking for. And Njabulo, tell us, how can our listeners connect with you and where should they follow you?
I don't have a website yet. I should actually create one. But on LinkedIn, that's really where I would say I am mostly. I am also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but I don't share a lot of professional wisdom there. I'm just normally curious and just a bystander, just absorbing and learning quite a lot. But LinkedIn could be a good interactive space, but I'm on Twitter as well. Njabulo Mashigo, or Njabulo_Mashigo, I should say. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, Njabulo, what is your message for the millions of kids and thousands of graduates that are now considering their next big move, that are looking at their career and are really wondering how should they go about starting their career? How should they go about entering the world of work?
Yeah. Be curious. I mean, I think now internet access is better. I know not everyone still has it, which is unfortunate. And it's one of our goals to make sure that that is possible as Vodacom. But I would say go to your student advisor's office. That's what I did. I was like, okay, I'm studying industrial psychology. It's got touches of human resources. And I went to the student advisor's office at Rhodes. And I found out about employers who were coming on campus. I attended career fairs. I would say, look at newspapers. There's still a lot of publications that go out when it's bursary time, graduate entry time. for new entrants into the workspace. But be curious, build relationships. LinkedIn is also a great platform. I've had people approach me on LinkedIn. I'm just finalizing my final year. Do you have a graduate program? Speak to different leaders. Don't be afraid to speak to HR people, business leaders. I think for me, the most important thing is take it up into your own hands. Be proactive. Chances are the job is not going to come looking for you and just find you sitting there. It has to find you working and looking and taking the ownership.
Well, Njabulo, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and leading the way, really inspiring us and being a role model yourself for so many youth that are really, really desperate now to find their foot into a career, and reminding us that dealing with ambiguity is a key skill that future leaders need to acquire and master.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much.